Well, it is that time of year, folks. Time for the 2014 Stanley Cup Playoffs. We have the first playoffs since the division realignment and the new playoff format, so we don't do the reseeding anymore. You have four teams in the divisions face each other, and then I guess the de facto champions of those divisions play the other divisional champions in their conference, and of course, then from there on out, it's business as usual. We got a lot of interesting matchups in the first round, and I say this all the time. The difference between hockey and other sports is that first round playoffs, the number one seed getting knocked off, happens all the time in the Stanley Cup playoffs. That's a rarity in the NBA. It really doesn't happen all that much in the NFL and Major League Baseball, but at least once a year you have at least one number one seed getting knocked off. And even though the Boston Bruins are favored to win the Stanley Cup this year, I don't think they're going to get past the first round. I think the Red Wings right now are probably the single hottest team playing right now in the National Hockey League. And even though they have been really rattled by injuries, I still think they have enough offensive firepower with guys like, Franzen and Datsuk and Alfredson to kind of get past Aginla and Bergeron. And as good as Rask is as a goaltender, I think Detroit is actually a little bit better off defensively with Gustafsson and Howard between the pipes. So I'm actually going to call a huge upset right now because I'm going to pick the Red Wings to knock off the number one seeded Bruins in what is going to be a shocker to everybody except you and me because we already know what's going to happen. Speaking of upsets, since the number one team gets knocked off early, might as well knock off the number two team already. You got Montreal and Tampa Bay. Should be an interesting series, but I think Tampa Bay, as the underdog, ends up winning this one. I look at them; they are a very, very well-suited team for the playoffs. A lot of really young talent like Callahan, Stamkos, Killorn. I think these guys are really going to come up and step up to the plate and take their team very, very far in the playoffs this year. Montreal, they're a good team, but they're a little old. I don't think guys like Briere and Van Eck are going to be enough to kind of push them really that far or even past the first round. Price is a good goaltender, but I really like Ben Bishop. I think this is the year where this Bishop kid really makes himself a star in the National Hockey League. So I'm going to call another upset. I'm going to have the Lightning taking down the Habs. Sorry, Canada. Pittsburgh against the Columbus Blue Jackets. This is probably the absolute easiest game in the entire playoffs to call. You look at Pittsburgh, just loaded. Crosby, Malkin, Sutter. And they got Fleury between the pipes. Who did the Blue Jackets have? They fought valiantly this year. I will give them that. But I'm sorry, when the best players in your team are guys like Boone Jenner and Matt Fratton, you're not going to be a Stanley Cup champion. I don't really see Bobrovsky or McElwain really coming in here and taking this team far. I got Pittsburgh winning, actually sweeping this series. Not much drama. Sorry, Columbus, your misery continues for at least another year. Philadelphia Flyers and New York Rangers. This is probably the most interesting matchup in the Eastern Conference first round. LeCavalier and Chemo are really hardcore. I think Philadelphia really has a great defense. Probably one of the better defenses in the entire Stanley Cup playoffs this year. Offensively, they're a great team. They're loaded with goaltenders. You got Mason, you got Emery, you got all these guys. And the Rangers, they're also very talented. Guys like St. Louis, you got Nash in there, you got Richards, and of course you got Lundqvist and Pipes. It's going to be a very tough and hard-fought series for both teams, but I actually end up thinking that the Flyers end up winning this one in a very tough 7-game series. So that's our first round in the Eastern Conference. Now let's go over to the Western Conference. I already picked one major first round upset with Detroit beating Boston. And you know what? I'm going to pull the trigger and actually go with the Stars to upset the Ducks as well. Looking at these two teams, I always like to look at teams from my playoffs that are really young, very fast with good defense and solid, reliable goaltending. And looking at Dallas right now, when you have Tim Thomas and Corey Lettinen in the goal, I think they're definitely in a far, far better position to play defensively than the Ducks right now, despite Anaheim's power with Getzlaf and Koivu and Perry and Solani. I actually think Seguin and Ben and Mueller are actually going to take this team even further. And I'm calling, once again, the major upset. I've got the Stars knocking off the Ducks, first round Western Conference. San Jose against LA. As we all know, LA, that's my team. I've really short-sided them the last 2 years. I said they wouldn't make perhaps the first round in 2012. What do you know? They win the entire Stanley Cup Playoffs and take home Lord Stanley that year. I didn't say they'd go very far last year. Then they made the Western Conference Finals. So I'm not making the mistake again this year. I think LA is in a better position than San Jose is. With Marlowe and Thornton, they're just a little bit too old. I really don't like having Naimi in your goal. I don't think it's really going to be a really winning formula to make you go far. Quick, one of the best goalies in the NHL, definitely reliable, definitely consistent. And of course you got Doughty, you got Brown, you got Kopitar. I really don't see any reason why the Kings would not persist and outdo San Jose in a series. So I'm taking the Kings in another miniature upset. The resurgent Avalanche against the upstart Minnesota Avalanche. Looking at the Wild, they got some good players. You got Ron Sutter, you got Danny Heatley, you got Matt Cook, and of course you have Harding, who has been the breakout goalie of the season, but he's injured, and I don't like the way that the Wild's current lineup looks. Compare that to Colorado, arguably the most promising looking lineup offensively out of any team in the playoffs. You've got Tanguay, you've got McLeod, you've got Williams, you've got all these guys, an incredibly talented team, and of course you've got some really good goaltending with Varlamov. You got Jiggy, you got even Berra if things get really bad. I think Colorado ends up taking this series in 6, maybe even 5, but I'm gonna go with 6 because I'm very cautious. St. Louis against Chicago. St. Louis. You got Oshie, you got Jackman, you got Pietrangelo. This is a very good defensive team. You got Ryan Miller, you got Lundstrom in goal. So defensively, they're a really solid team, but their offense I'm really worried about. Compare that to Chicago, where obviously their offense with Kane and Hossa and Toews really isn't in doubt at all. Even though their defense and especially their goaltending with Hobby Bullen being injured is definitely something to not make you really want to take the Blackhawks too far in your pool. That said, I think Chicago's offense is going to be enough to take a 7-game hard-fought series against the Blues. So there you go. That's Eastern and your Western lineup. Start with the West. Dallas against Los Angeles. Oh, I really, really want to push the button on the Kings, but I've just got a feeling about Dallas this year. When you compare the two teams, I just think that X factor of having both Kari Lehtonen and Tim Thomas in goal, along with a slightly better defense for Dallas, is enough to give them the advantage over LA. Even though I think it's going to be a very, very interesting series, I think the Stars, a Cinderella team through and through, end up beating the Kings in 7 games and reaching the Western Conference Finals for the first time since the 1800s. Okay, Colorado against Chicago, another very interesting matchup. Kind of similar to Dallas against LA, because it's very offense-oriented. I think this is where, Colorado has a slightly better offense, I think, than Chicago, and they definitely have the better defense and better goalkeeping. And I think Chicago's defense and the lack of solid goaltending is really going to keep them from getting past the Avs here. Pretty easy one. I'm taking Colorado, so we're looking all shades of 2000 and 2001. And you got the Stars and the Avalanche battling out for the Western Conference Championship. Swing back over to the East, you got the Red Wings against Tampa Bay. The Red Wings playing very well. I think they have enough juice to get past Boston, but I don't think they're really going to win a war of attrition against Tampa Bay. And as good as Tampa Bay, Tampa Bay is really a great team, actually, incredibly underrated, and I always like teams that are kind of flying under the radar going into these playoff situations. Detroit's good, but they're just too banged up. That goalkeeping, it's solid, but I don't think it's solid enough, and I think Ben Bishop once again, is enough to take this team further. So I've got Tampa Bay making it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals as a Cinderella team. They've done it a couple of times the last couple of years. Nobody ever talks about them. Battle of Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh against Philadelphia. A very, very interesting series, but I think at the end of the day, Philadelphia with their defense is actually going to be enough to prevent the Penguins' high-powered offense from getting out. When you compare goaltenders, Fleury, he's really good, but, I just like the tri-headed goalie with Mason and Emery. And, what's the name of the other guy? Well, if you're a fan of Philadelphia, you can fill me in. But I think that's enough to get them that far in the playoffs. So our conference finals, not really the most popular picks, but you got Tampa Bay against Philadelphia over in the East, Dallas against Colorado over in the West. Once again, I like young teams, and I like teams that are very solid defensively. I think Dallas and Colorado is going to be an interesting series, but at the end of the day, I just think Colorado beats Dallas in every other category. They're better offensively, better playing defensive play, and just better goalkeeping overall. So I see Colorado Avalanche being your 2014 representatives of the Western Conference Finals. And over in the East, I think it's going to be another very hard-fought series with Tampa Bay against Philadelphia. Philadelphia is very hard-hitting, but I just think Ben Bishop, there's something about this kid. I'm just feeling it this year, along with that very, very young crew over in Tampa Bay. I think is going to have the longevity to make it. So there you go. Tampa Bay Lightning, Colorado Avalanche. This is your 2014 Stanley Cup Finals. The NHL is going to hate this, but it should be a very good series because you have two very young, very offensive-minded teams with great goaltending and solid defense hitting each other. I think it's going to be a very old-school, Detroit Red Wings against Colorado Avalanche, the New Jersey Devils winning everything kind of series where it's all about defense. I think this game actually will go to 7, and it's going to be very hard-fought, and it's going to be really awesome, lots of points scored. But it's going to come down to goalkeeping. And as good as this Bishop kid is, I'm just looking at Colorado right now. I'm looking at Varlamar. He's played great, and I'm saying, why not? Why not get Jiggy back in the pops if things get down to it? He's a veteran. He's got the young upstart, the Patrick Waugh in the making in front of him. As much as I hate to say it, I'm gonna have to pick the Colorado Avalanche, and it pains me as a Kings fan and old school Red Wings fans to say this, but I have to go with the Colorado Avalanche as your presumptive 2014 Stanley Cup champions. They beat the Lightning in 7. So nobody's predicting it now. I said it way back in April, and take it to the bank. Should be a good series. Should be a good playoffs. Thank God for playoff hockey.